When you close your eyes at night, the world fades, but your brain does not. While you drift into the softness of sleep, billions of neurons begin their quiet choreography. It's a dance without music, a construction site without noise. And yet, within that stillness, the mind rebuilds itself. We say, "I need to rest my brain," but the brain never rests. Even in deep sleep, especially in deep sleep, it hums with purpose. It's like a night shift in a great library. During the day, the halls are loud with readers, books are pulled off shelves, scattered, forgotten. But when the lights dim, the librarians move silently between aisles, reshelving, repairing, deciding which stories are worth keeping and which are destined for dust. That's what your neurons are doing while you dream. They are librarians of your life. Each synapse, that delicate connection between two neurons, is being examined. Does this memory matter? Is this habit worth reinforcing? Can this mistake be safely forgotten? It's not rest, it's refinement. During sleep, energy shifts. Instead of reacting to the world, your brain begins reorganizing it. Neuroscientists call it offline processing, a poetic name, as if your consciousness logs out, but the system keeps working, defragmenting, backing up, optimizing. In your hippocampus, that seahorse-shaped keeper of short-term memories, electrical ripples surge in rhythmic waves. It's as if the events of the day are being replayed in fast motion. Each ripple tells a story: the cafe you visited, the face of a stranger, the tune that stuck in your head. But not all memories survive the night. Some fade, others are fused into deeper storage in the neocortex, the sprawling library of your long-term self. You wake up, and your mind feels lighter. Not because it did nothing, but because it cleaned. Here's the twist. The more complex your day was, the more your brain needs sleep. The harder you learn, the deeper you must rest. It's like a craftsman sharpening tools after a long day's work. Without rest, the blade dulls. Without sleep, the mind forgets. In the early stages of sleep, NREM, neurons fire in synchronized slow waves, resetting sensitivity like dimming lights to recalibrate their glow. Later, during REM sleep, the stage of vivid dreams, the brain lights up again. The cortex buzzes, the amygdala sings, the hippocampus whispers stories of yesterday. It's not chaos, it's composition. The mind, dreaming, tests its architecture, rebuilding logic, emotion, and imagination into something coherent again. Sleep is not just biological maintenance, it's cognitive evolution in miniature. Every night, your brain revisits its entire history of thought, quietly rewriting what it means to be you. When you study a language, sleep is when the grammar settles in. When you learn a skill, sleep is when muscle memory locks it in. When you face heartbreak, sleep is when emotion softens and survival rewrites itself as wisdom. It's not forgetting, it's editing. And in that editing, the self becomes more efficient, more adaptable, more alive. Imagine standing by a sleeping friend. Their breath rises and falls, eyes flicker behind closed lids, fingers twitch as if holding a phantom object. Inside, circuits spark in patterns of impossible grace. One neuron replays a note from a song you both heard. Another reactivates the smile they gave you that day. The dream is not random. It's the mind rehearsing existence. In that sense, the sleeping brain is the most poetic machine in the universe. It turns silence into memory and memory into meaning. So when you lie in bed tonight and you think, "I'm done for the day," remember, You're not. Your body may rest, but your brain begins its masterpiece. Somewhere deep inside, billions of tiny sparks awaken. They file your thoughts, mend your emotions, and build tomorrow's version of you. You're not escaping life when you sleep. You're becoming it. The Night Builders. When the city of your mind falls asleep, its workers awaken. They carry invisible blueprints, walk across dark scaffolds of thought, and begin to repair, to reinforce, to redesign. These are the Night Builders, your neurons, your glial partners, your tireless architects of memory. They work without your awareness, but every morning you awaken inside a slightly new brain. Imagine a skyline made of connections. Every idea, every feeling, every habit, a skyscraper of signals. During the day, traffic rushes between towers, messages fly, bridges tremble, systems overload, but when sleep descends, the lights dim in the conscious city, and the builders appear. Tiny crews, proteins, ions, enzymes carry out their delicate repairs. Some add new beams between towers, strengthening the bridges that worked. Others quietly dismantle the unstable ones, removing connections that waste energy. The blueprint? Experience itself. Everything you thought, felt, or feared today becomes a set of instructions for the builders tonight. At first glance, the sleeping brain seems still, but under the calm waves of slow NREM sleep, neurons flash in silent rhythm. Slow oscillations, spindles, ripples. These electrical patterns are the language of repair. They tell glial cells where to send resources, which synapses to nourish, and which to let fade into quiet. Your brain is pruning its garden, trimming excess branches so that the healthiest trees can grow strong. It's a paradox of growth. You learn by forgetting well. And while this pruning happens, neurotransmitters, serotonin, acetylcholine, dopamine, rise and fall like musical notes, each guiding a different phase of the restoration. Too much of one note, and the melody becomes chaos. Too little, and no new learning will take root. The builders know this music by heart. If neurons are the builders, then glial cells are the caretakers. For decades, they were ignored. Just support cells, scientists said. But now we know the truth. They're the silent engineers of mental clarity. Astrocytes sweep up excess chemicals, clearing the pathways. Microglia patrol for damage, devouring debris left by exhausted synapses. Oligodendrocytes wrap axons with fresh layers of myelin, a new coat of insulation for tomorrow's faster thoughts. And all of this happens while you drift through dream worlds you won't even remember. The brain cleans itself through the glymphatic system, flushing toxins, washing away metabolic waste, a midnight tide that recedes by dawn. You wake up not only rested, but rewired. You cannot feel the builders at work, but you are their project. When you master a skill, when a melody feels easier to play, when a fear feels less sharp, that's not willpower. That's the result of their night shift. Learning is not about cramming facts. It's about giving the brain time to build its own architecture around them. The builders need silence, stability, darkness. That's why disrupted sleep does more than make you tired. It makes you fragile. Without those hours of cellular construction, your emotional wiring frays, your focus splinters, and yesterday's lessons collapse into noise. But when you sleep deeply, the builders finish their task, and you rise stronger, a cathedral slightly more complete. The night is not a pause in your story. It's a chapter you never get to read, but always benefit from. Somewhere inside, as dreams unfold like mist, your brain is hard at work, strengthening what matters, letting go of what doesn't. Each morning, you awaken not as who you were, but as who you've been quietly becoming. The builders smile, their work unseen, their masterpiece ongoing. Dreams as lessons. Dreams are not random. They are rehearsals. Soft, surreal classrooms where the mind teaches itself how to live, how to feel, how to survive. When you dream, your brain isn't escaping reality. It's simulating it. In the darkness behind your eyelids, neurons replay memories, mix them with imagination, and run thousands of what-if scenarios. It's the ultimate rehearsal space, a theater where you are both the actor and the scriptwriter. In one dream, you fall, and your amygdala learns fear's edge. In another, you fly, and your brain practices confidence without consequence. You might argue with a loved one, and by morning, the sting of the real conflict has softened, because the dream rehearsed its resolution. Each of these stories is training. Training without effort. A lesson without pain. Researchers have watched sleeping brains and seen the evidence. The same neurons that fired while you learned something during the day fire again during REM sleep. A pianist's motor cortex plays silent notes. A chess player's frontal lobe revisits lost positions. A dancer's cerebellum rehearses the spin again and again without a single muscle moving. Dreams are memory consolidation wrapped in metaphor. The bizarre symbols, the talking animals, the endless staircases, the impossible doors, are your brain's creative shorthand for reorganizing experience. They are emotional compression algorithms. When the brain can't replay the day literally, it does so symbolically, and in doing so, turns chaos into wisdom. Dreams are also emotional editors. They take the raw film of daily life and cut it into something you can live with. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, is highly active during REM sleep, but without the prefrontal cortex control. That means you feel emotions vividly, but without acting on them. It's emotional exposure therapy, night after night. That's why nightmares, painful as they are, serve a purpose. They're not punishments, they're preparations. The brain's way of saying, let's face this fear here, so you don't freeze when it comes for real. Dreams let us fail safely, so we can succeed awake. But dreams don't just heal, they create. During REM sleep, brain regions that rarely talk during the day begin to collaborate. Visual centers merge with logic circuits. Emotion pathways cross with motor memories. This is why so many breakthroughs happen in dreams. Kekulé seeing the benzene ring, McCartney hearing yesterday, Mendeleev arranging the periodic table. The dreaming brain is the sandbox of innovation. It's where rules bend, where the impossible is tested, and sometimes where genius sneaks in quietly between midnight and dawn. If you think of dreams as nonsense, you underestimate your teacher. It doesn't lecture. It demonstrates. It asks, what if? What happens when you lose control? What happens when you find courage? And as you wander through those strange landscapes, running, flying, drowning, loving, your mind learns what it means to be you. No classroom can rival this. No professor can replace it. Dreams are the oldest form of learning. They existed before language, before tools, before fire. Animals dream too. Their paws twitch, their eyes dart beneath lids. The same circuits that replay life help them adapt, remember, and survive. When dawn approaches and your dream dissolves like mist, don't dismiss it as fiction. It was a lesson. a rehearsal, a blueprint for tomorrow's self. The dream fades, but the wiring remains. And when you wake, with a clearer thought, a lighter heart, a new understanding, it's because somewhere in the night, your brain finished teaching you something your waking mind had yet to grasp. Memory replay. At night, your brain becomes a storyteller, but unlike daytime imagination, these tales are factual, drawn straight from the archives of your waking life. It begins in the hippocampus, that small, seahorse-shaped librarian of memory. When the world outside fades, it opens its vaults and starts to replay the day. Every experience you've had, every sound, image, or thought leaves a faint trace in neural circuits. During the day, these traces are fragile, like chalk lines on a crowded street. But during sleep, the hippocampus runs through them again, over and over, turning faint outlines into engravings. This is memory replay, the brain's way of rehearsing life until it sticks. In experiments, rats running through a maze show bursts of neural activity in the hippocampus. Later, while they sleep, the same neurons fire again, in the exact same order. It's as if the brain replays the day's movie, but faster and in silence. For humans, the same happens when we learn a new skill or absorb information. The brain replays not only actions, but context, the smell of the room, the sound of your teacher's voice, the emotion attached to the memory. Each replay strengthens the neural path, like carving a groove in stone. The hippocampus is not just storing information, it's deciding what's worth keeping. Not every detail of the day makes it through. The brain is a master editor, choosing what serves the story of the self. Moments with emotional weight, joy, fear, excitement, get priority. The rest, trimmed away by the night's editorial process. In a way, memory replay is the mind's highlight reel. Not the raw footage, but the meaningful moments that define what you'll recall tomorrow. And this replay doesn't happen just once. It's recursive, occurring over multiple nights, gradually moving memories from the hippocampus to the neocortex, where they become part of long-term identity. You don't remember every replay, but the replay remembers you. Every night's sleep follows a rhythm, cycles of deep NREM rest and vivid REM dreams. During NREM, slow waves roll across the cortex, carrying memory signals from the hippocampus outward, a gentle broadcast to the whole brain. During REM, the lights come back on, and emotion floods the system. The memories replay again, but now with feeling. This dual process, calm transfer and emotional integration, turns knowledge into understanding. Think of it as NREM teaches you what happened. REM teaches you why it mattered. Together, they make meaning. When you wake and find that yesterday's lesson feels easier, that a new word in another language comes to your tongue faster, that's replay. Your brain was practicing all night. Athletes perform better after sleep. Musicians remember longer pieces. Even emotional insights sharpen. You wake up understanding what you couldn't articulate before. Sleep is not a break from learning. It's the completion of it. The mind weaves its own curriculum. It doesn't ask permission. You dream. But your hippocampus is lecturing quietly to the rest of your cortex, turning experiences into expertise, moments into meaning. So if you ever feel guilty for resting, remember this: the greatest work of your intelligence happens while you're not awake to witness it. Your dreams are your study sessions, your sleep, the final exam. From chaos to order. Inside the sleeping brain, order is not the starting point, it's the destination. The night begins in disarray, a storm of flickering impulses, memories half awake, emotions tangled in their own echoes. But as sleep deepens, the chaos folds inward, finding symmetry, rhythm, and pattern. By dawn, the mind has done something extraordinary. It has built meaning out of noise. In the first stages of sleep, the brain is noisy. Billions of neurons fire in scattered bursts, as if each is trying to speak at once. Thoughts from the day mix with fragments of dreams. Sensations overlap, a sensory kaleidoscope. This chaos isn't failure, it's preparation. Like an orchestra tuning its instruments, the brain must first generate noise before it can discover harmony. The hippocampus throws out signals, tiny sparks of memory replay. The cortex responds, sometimes agreeing, sometimes misfiring. It's a debate of possibilities, a neural storm where truth is still forming. Then, slowly, neurons begin to align. Their firing becomes rhythmic, waves of electricity sweeping across the cortex in unison. This moment marks the transition into slow-wave sleep, the deep, healing phase where learning crystallizes. Each slow oscillation is like a metronome tick that organizes the night's rehearsal. During these waves, the hippocampus sends out memory fragments, packets of experience, while the neocortex listens carefully, storing what it deems useful. Bit by bit, the chaos quiets. The storm becomes structure. The mind, once scattered, finds coherence. To outside eyes, sleep looks passive. But under the surface, mathematical elegance unfolds. Neuroscientists describe the process as homeostatic regulation, the brain balancing the strength of its synapses. Some are dialed down to prevent saturation. Others are reinforced, ensuring vital connections endure. It's like a gardener trimming a wild hedge, leaving just enough growth for new blossoms to appear. Too much order, and the brain becomes rigid, unable to adapt. Too much chaos, and thought disintegrates. Sleep is where it learns the balance. You might think of this as nature's most elegant algorithm. Input, the raw, chaotic data of experience. Process, replay, synchronization, pruning. Output, a refined, meaningful network, ready to predict, imagine, and decide. In this sense, dreams are not escapes. They're simulations where the brain tests the new structure against imagined realities. Every symbol, every surreal twist in a dream is the system stress-testing its connections. What if, the brain asks, would this pattern still make sense if the world bent this way? It's creative debugging, chaos refined through imagination. Emotion is the compass guiding this reordering. The limbic system, the brain's emotional core, remains highly active during REM sleep, while rational circuits rest. This allows feelings, untethered from logic, to surface and reorganize themselves. Anger becomes understanding. Fear becomes preparation. Grief becomes memory softened by time. Emotional processing during dreams is what makes them feel true, even when they're absurd. They hold psychological logic, a kind of inner coherence beyond reason's reach. By morning, the chaos that began the night has been sculpted into clarity. Neurons that once shouted over each other now hum in quiet synchrony. The architecture of thought, the balance between logic and emotion, between stability and flexibility, is renewed. This nightly transformation is why sleep deprivation is so destructive. Without it, the storm never resolves. The mind remains disorganized, its signals misaligned. We become moody, impulsive, forgetful, victims of unfinished repair. But with deep, consistent rest, the architecture holds. We awaken not only rested, but recomposed. Every night, your brain walks the narrow path between chaos and order. It dives into noise so that it may emerge with harmony. Dreams are the proof that beauty can grow from confusion, that the mind, left to its own rhythms, can turn the day's disorder into tomorrow's understanding. So when you dream, you are not lost in fantasy. You are building the order that will make you human again by morning. Synaptic downscaling. When night falls, your brain begins to forget, not by accident, but by design. It's one of the most elegant paradoxes in biology. You must lose some connections to keep learning at all. The burden of a day, every moment you're awake, neurons are busy strengthening their bonds. Every glance, word, sensation, or fleeting thought is recorded in micro-adjustments, a tweak in the weight of a synapse here, a burst of reinforcement there. By evening, your brain is a jungle of connections, thick and tangled, full of competing signals. And that's the problem. If all these connections stayed equally strong, your brain would become overloaded, unable to tell signal from noise. Like a microphone left too close to a speaker, it would start to feed back on itself, drowning in static. So, as you sink into sleep, the mind begins its quiet cleansing, not to erase meaning, but to clear the space where meaning can grow. Scientists call it synaptic downscaling, a global, gentle weakening of all synapses, not destruction. Calibration. Imagine a painter who spends all day layering colors on a canvas. By nightfall, the image is beautiful, but blurry, heavy with pigment. Before continuing tomorrow, the painter scrapes away the excess, leaving only the essential strokes. That's what your brain does in sleep. Each synapse is reviewed by the invisible sculptor of the night. Connections that fired often during the day are preserved, perhaps even enhanced. Those that flickered only once, trivial sensations, background chatter, are trimmed away. The result? A lighter, clearer network, an architecture ready to learn again. Under the microscope, this process looks almost musical. During deep, slow-wave sleep, neurons enter synchronized oscillations, their voltage rising and falling together like the breathing of an ocean. Each wave carries a subtle signal: reduce, rebalance, restore. Tiny chemical changes follow. Receptors are pulled back from the synaptic surface, dendritic spines slightly retract. It's a microscopic choreography of subtraction. But this is not decay, it's renewal. By scaling everything down, the brain maintains relative differences between strong and weak synapses. The melody remains the same, just played softer, so tomorrow's notes can be heard. We think of forgetting as failure. Biology disagrees. Forgetting is what keeps you sane. Without it, the day's fragments, every overheard word, every meaningless sight, would accumulate like dust in a machine. You would drown in detail. You wouldn't learn. You'd memorize noise. Children, whose brains are constantly rewiring, need even more of this nightly cleansing. That's why they sleep so deeply, their dreams vivid and unfiltered, their synapses endlessly reshaped. Adults, too, depend on this neural housekeeping. After a sleepless night, your attention falters, memories blur, and creativity dries up. It's not fatigue, it's clutter. Your brain simply didn't get to take out the trash. There's another reason for the downscaling. Energy. Every synapse consumes resources. The more connections you have firing, the higher the metabolic cost. If every memory remained fully on, your brain would burn itself out. So it optimizes, reduces redundant links, balances energy across networks. It's the same principle an engineer uses to prevent overheating in a system. You keep what's vital and power down what's idle. This pruning doesn't make you less intelligent, it makes you sustainable. What determines what stays and what goes? Patterns, repetition, emotion. The more a circuit was used during the day, the stronger its claim to survival. A face you saw once may fade, but a problem you wrestled with, a melody that moved you, those leave deeper imprints. Synaptic downscaling isn't random. It's curation. Your brain chooses, each night, what your story will remember. When you wake, you are not the same person who fell asleep. Your mind is leaner, your networks quieter, your canvas wiped clean for new impressions. This is why morning feels like possibility, because biologically it is. Your brain has recalibrated itself for learning, ready to absorb the day with renewed clarity. You've lost countless connections, but you've gained coherence. You've forgotten fragments, but you've preserved essence. That's not decay, that's wisdom. Each night, your brain rehearses its own death and rebirth, not of consciousness, but of connection. It deletes to remember. It weakens to grow stronger. It forgets so that thought can stay alive. And in the quiet of that invisible pruning, the architecture of tomorrow's self takes shape. Hebbian harmony. There is a quiet law beneath all learning. It doesn't shout, doesn't demand attention, but every thought you've ever had, every memory you've ever kept, obeys it. It is the rule of togetherness. Neurons that fire together, wire together. In 1949, psychologist Donald Hebb gave words to what the brain had always known. When one neuron consistently helps another to fire, the link between them grows stronger, as if the two have recognized each other in the crowd and decided to hold hands forever. This is Hebbian learning, the foundation of memory, skill, and adaptation. It's how a newborn learns to see light, how a musician's fingers learn their instrument, how you can recall a scent and find it instantly tied to a place, a feeling, a name. Each repetition deepens the pathway. Each shared spark makes the connection more likely to occur again. It is not magic, it is mathematics written in biology. Picture two neurons, one sending a pulse, the other receiving. If that happens only once, nothing much changes. But if it happens repeatedly, the synapse between them strengthens, receptors multiply, channels widen, transmission becomes smoother, faster, more reliable. Over time, this simple repetition builds meaning. Patterns become habits. Habits become understanding. Understanding becomes the architecture of mind. It is the brain's way of whispering. This matters. Remember it. When you learn to play a chord, to ride a bike, to pronounce a word in another language, Hebbian harmony is what engraves it into your circuits. Each repetition is a promise. The neurons rehearsing a dance until their rhythm is perfect. Learning is not about isolated cells. It's about ensembles, thousands, sometimes millions of neurons firing in complex patterns of timing and intensity, like instruments in a vast orchestra. Each ensemble forms a representation of a face, a movement, a word, an emotion. The more often that representation is replayed, the more stable it becomes. What begins as a fragile duet turns into a symphony of coordination. The notes of thought turn into chords of knowledge. But harmony is not free. Each new bond carries metabolic cost. It takes protein synthesis, energy from ATP, and structural changes at the synapse, a miniature act of construction. The brain, wise in its limits, does not reinforce everything. Only connections that matter, those repeated, relevant, emotional, are selected for strengthening. The rest fade, fall silent, and make room for new music. It's not unlike a composer who keeps only the melodies that resonate, discarding the noise. Hebbian learning is not about storing data. It's about resonance, the echo between neurons that say, yes, we belong to the same song. Every skill you build is a melody of these echoes. Every idea, a harmony of previous patterns joined in a new way. This is why practice shapes the mind so deeply. When you repeat an action, you are not just improving performance, you are tuning your neural instruments, teaching them to play in time. That's why consistency beats intensity. 1,000 small repetitions outperform one grand effort, because the music of the brain is written in rhythm, not volume. Hebbian harmony thrives in balance. Too much strengthening, and the network locks. Thoughts loop endlessly. Memories become obsessions. Too little, and learning dissolves. Nothing sticks. Sleep restores this balance. The night, as we've seen, rehearses and prunes, keeping Hebbian growth under control. The brain is both artist and janitor. It creates connections, then tidies them to preserve coherence. If you think of memory as architecture, then Hebbian plasticity is its foundation stone. Every creative thought, every reflex, every piece of learned compassion is built on this rule. The more two cells collaborate, the stronger their partnership becomes. And that partnership can last decades, sometimes a lifetime. When an old song brings tears, when a familiar path feels safe, that's Hebbian harmony at work, the ancient melody of repetition and recognition. The mind learns by resonance, not command. It builds its symphony not through effort, but through participation, each neuron singing its note in response to another's call. And through this endless dialogue of sparks, the architecture of thought rises, one connection at a time. Long-term potentiation and depression. Learning is not a spark, it's a scar, not a wound of pain, but a trace that says, I was here, I mattered. This is how memory takes root, through lasting physical change in the brain's fabric, etching experience into structure. The name of that process is long-term potentiation, and its shadow, long-term depression. Together, they are the yin and yang of learning. When two neurons fire together repeatedly, something remarkable happens at their junction. The receiving cell, the postsynaptic neuron, begins to take notice. Its receptors become more sensitive. Its ion channels stay open longer. Its chemical messengers grow more plentiful. It's as if the neuron leans closer, saying, I'm listening now. Speak again, and I'll hear you faster. This is long-term potentiation, LTP, the enduring strengthening of a synaptic connection after persistent activation. It's not metaphor, it's mechanics. Calcium floods into the cell through special channels, triggering cascades of proteins and enzymes. New receptors, especially AMPA-type glutamate receptors, are inserted into the membrane, amplifying the next signal. With each reinforcement, the connection grows more efficient, more likely to fire, a neural echo chamber of remembrance. This is how practice becomes proficiency and repetition becomes mastery. But where there is strengthening, there must also be softening. Long-term depression, LTD, is not sadness, it's wisdom. It's how the brain says, This connection no longer serves us. When two neurons fail to fire together, their bond gradually weakens. Receptors are withdrawn, synapses shrink, signals fade. It's the biological form of letting go, a gentle erosion of the irrelevant. LTD ensures that your neural map doesn't grow wild. It keeps circuits flexible, ready to adapt to new patterns and ideas. Without it, learning would fill you with noise. You'd remember everything, but understand nothing. So LTP writes memory, and LTD edits it. Together, they keep the story coherent. At the molecular level, this balance is a symphony of timing and chemistry. Too much calcium entering a neuron, and LTP is triggered. The signal is reinforced. Too little, and LTD takes over. The connection fades. The precise timing between spikes matters too. If the presynaptic neuron fires just before the postsynaptic one, it strengthens their bond. If it fires after, the connection weakens. This is called spike timing dependent plasticity, STDP, the fine-tuned rhythm of cause and effect, etched into milliseconds. The brain listens not only to who speaks, but when. It's not just a conversation, it's choreography. Imagine your brain as a sculptor. Each thought, emotion, and experience is a strike of the chisel. LTP adds depth, carving sharper lines of remembrance. LTD smooths the rough edges, removing what doesn't belong. Day by day, the sculpture changes. Never finished, always becoming. This is why you forget the name of a stranger, but remember the melody that once made you cry. It's why trauma can burn itself deep, while trivial facts dissolve into mist. Your brain is not a library, it's a garden, and plasticity is the gardener's hand. When the harmony between LTP and LTD breaks, the consequences are profound. Too much potentiation, and the network becomes hyperactive. This can lead to epilepsy, where runaway excitation spirals out of control. Too much depression, and learning falters, as if the circuits have forgotten how to care. Neurodegenerative diseases, aging, and even chronic stress can disrupt this delicate equilibrium. Yet in youth, in curiosity, the balance holds strong, a dance between creation and erasure that allows the mind to evolve. We often think of learning as storing knowledge, but in truth, it's reshaping tissue. Each idea leaves a physical footprint. Each memory, a rearrangement of matter. Neuroscientist Carla Schatz once said, "Neurons that fire together, wire together, but those out of sync lose their link." That's the duality of LTP and LTD. It's not about memorizing, it's about synchronizing. Every day you learn, the orchestra of your mind retunes itself, adjusting every instrument to keep the music in harmony. During sleep, these processes intensify. The brain replays daytime patterns, reinforcing the ones worth keeping and gently erasing the rest. It's as if your neural symphony rehearses again, deciding which melodies will carry into the next performance. The dreams you forget are the memories your neurons decided not to strengthen. The ones you keep are the ones that harmonized with purpose. LTP and LTD are not just chemical phenomena, they are the grammar of thought. They define how experience becomes knowledge and how knowledge becomes identity. In the microscopic ballet of synapses lies the secret of who you are, a being sculpted by patterns of fire and silence, remembering through balance, forgetting through grace. The molecular memory. Memory is not just electricity, it's chemistry. Written in molecules, stitched into proteins, encoded in the shape of a cell. If the firing of neurons is the sound of thought, then the molecules within them are the ink that records it. Every experience, every lesson, every fleeting recognition is translated into matter, so small you could fit billions of traces into the width of a fingernail. Let's descend into the synapse, that microscopic cleft between two neurons. On one side, neurotransmitters are released. On the other, receptors capture them. That's the language of instant communication. But for a memory to last, something deeper must occur, a rewriting of the internal machinery. Calcium, once again, is the messenger. It floods into the postsynaptic neuron, triggering a cascade of enzymes, CAMKI, PKC, and Krebs among them, the molecular artists of plasticity. These molecules set off gene expression, calling the cell's nucleus into action. New proteins are synthesized, receptors reshaped, dendritic spines thickened. The neuron changes its anatomy, not symbolically, but physically. A thought, a skill, a love becomes a pattern etched in molecular structure. Each strengthened synapse gains new receptors, often AMPA-type glutamate receptors, which act like volume knobs, amplifying the signal's strength. The cell's internal scaffolding, actin filaments, reorganizes to support the growing connection. Dendritic spines elongate or widen, their shapes becoming miniature monuments to memory. It's like a city illuminated at night. As certain neighborhoods become more active, more energy flows their way. More roads are built, more connections form. That is learning in its purest form. The city of the mind, expanding molecule by molecule. Even a single remembered word can spark the growth of hundreds of new synaptic receptors. The brain is constantly building, repairing, refining. No thought is truly fleeting, not until chemistry allows it to fade. But how does the brain decide which moment deserves a molecular monument? That's where synaptic tagging comes in. When a neuron is briefly activated, it sets a tiny molecular flag, a tag at that synapse. If, within a certain time window, the neuron also experiences a stronger burst of activity, the molecular machinery will return to that tag, stabilizing it with new proteins. It's as if the neuron says, "Ah, this one again, then keep it." This elegant timing mechanism ensures that important experiences, the ones repeated or emotionally charged, are preserved. It's the cellular equivalent of recognition. And it's why repetition and emotion are the twin engines of memory. Inside every neuron, molecules are constantly talking. Phosphorylation signals, messenger RNA, transcription factors, they are all participants in an endless biochemical debate. Some say, strengthen this synapse. Others reply, we have enough, weaken that one. It's a molecular democracy, each decision shaping the neuron's identity. And though we call this process memory, it's more like metabolism, constant, fluid, adapting to need. Even the memories you think are stable are being subtly rewritten every time you recall them. The molecules rearrange, the receptors shift, the connections pulse with new life. Memory is not storage, it's living structure. Neurochemistry doesn't work in isolation. It dances with emotion. Adrenaline and cortisol etch memories deeper during intense experiences. That's why trauma feels unforgettable. Dopamine rewards patterns of learning, nudging the brain to seek them again. Emotion tells the molecular architects where to build. A lesson wrapped in feeling becomes unforgettable, not by choice, but by chemical command. That's why we remember heartbreaks more vividly than phone numbers. Despite its complexity, this molecular memory is fragile. Protein turnover constantly replaces old molecules with new ones. Synapses are rebuilt and recycled. And yet, somehow, the pattern persists, like a melody that survives even when every instrument is changed. It's not the molecules themselves that hold the memory, but the relationships between them, the rhythm of activation, the blueprint of recurrence. That's why scientists call memory emergent. It's not in the parts, but in their harmony. At night, the brain revisits these chemical patterns. The molecules that encode daytime experiences are stabilized during sleep. During REM sleep, bursts of activity replay neural sequences, and the underlying proteins consolidate, locking in the changes made during the day. It's like wet clay hardening overnight. The sculpture of memory sets in silence. But the process isn't rigid. The next day's experiences can reshape it again, adding detail, nuance, correction. Your memories are never still. They are alive. Within every neuron, there's an entire laboratory where atoms learn to remember. Each protein is a trace of thought. Each molecule a witness to experience. The next time you recall a childhood smell or a lover's laugh, know that somewhere in your brain, tiny molecules are dancing, reenacting the choreography of that moment. That's not poetry, that's chemistry. REM and NREM roles. Sleep is not one thing. It is two worlds intertwined, the quiet architect, NREM, and the dreaming artist, REM. While your body lies still, your mind wanders between them, shaping memory, emotion, and identity. Each night is a journey through both, a conversation between reason and imagination. When we drift into slumber, the first to arrive is NREM, non-rapid eye movement sleep. It is deep, rhythmic, heavy, a descent into the slow waves of the brain. During NREM, neurons pulse in unison, like tides rolling across the cortex. It's the phase of reconstruction, when the brain replays the day's experiences and decides which to keep, which to let go. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, muscles relax. The body repairs itself. But inside the skull, a quiet form of learning begins. Then, as the night matures, another realm awakens, REM sleep, the rapid eye movement stage. Here, the brain lights up almost as vividly as when awake. Eyes dart beneath the eyelids. Dreams unfold. Vivid, strange, emotional. If NREM builds the structure, REM paints the mural. In deep NREM sleep, neurons fire in slow, synchronized oscillations, bursts of activity followed by brief silences. These slow waves act like waves washing over the brain, coordinating communication between the hippocampus, short-term storage, and the neocortex, long-term storage. It's a nightly dialogue. The hippocampus replays recent experiences, and the cortex listens, integrates, and weaves them into existing knowledge. This is memory consolidation, the process of turning moments into understanding. During this time, the hippocampus sends out bursts known as sharp wave ripples, miniature echoes of waking experiences. Meanwhile, the cortex responds with spindles, rhythmic bursts around 12-15 Hz that act as messengers between regions. It's a duet of biology, a teacher and a student, repeating lessons until they're learned. Without this slow-wave rehearsal, memories fade, skills erode, and learning remains shallow. Then REM sleep arrives, a paradox of motionless body and active mind. In this phase, the prefrontal cortex, the region of logic, and self-control quietly steps aside. Meanwhile, emotional centers, the amygdala, limbic system, and visual cortex ignite with activity. This shift allows free association. Memories mix with imagination. Logic melts into metaphor, and from that blend, creativity is born. Dreams in REM are like simulations. The brain tests scenarios, replays challenges, explores possibilities. It's rehearsal for life itself, without risk, without consequence. This is why REM dreams often carry emotional weight. They help regulate mood and prepare you to face uncertainty when you wake. For a long time, scientists thought NREM and REM were rivals, one for rest, the other for madness. Now we know better. They are partners in cognition. NREM stabilizes the structure of memory. REM makes it meaningful. NREM says, "Here's the data." RM replies, "Here's the story." The cycle between them, roughly 90 minutes at a time, is not random. It's the rhythm of learning, the heartbeat of adaptation. You pass through it 4 to 6 times each night, each cycle deepening the night's education. By morning, your brain has rebuilt itself, subtly changed by every dream. When you cut your sleep short, you don't just lose rest, you lose memory. REM deprivation impairs the consolidation of facts and skills. REM deprivation disrupts emotion and creativity. Soldiers, doctors, parents, anyone who sacrifices sleep knows the dull fog that follows, difficulty focusing, recalling, feeling. That's not just fatigue, it's incomplete neural work. You interrupted your brain mid-sentence. If you could plot your sleep on a graph, you'd see waves of depth and activity, 4 or 5 full sleep cycles, each about an hour and a half long. Early cycles are dominated by deep NREM, the body repairing, the mind archiving. Later cycles tilt toward REM, the painter returning to add color and emotion. This alternation is evolution's masterpiece. Every species that dreams, from birds to whales to humans, follows some version of this dance. It is as ancient as breathing. Sleep is not escape. It's orchestration. Every night, your brain divides the labor. NREM builds the foundation. REM decorates the cathedral. When you wake, you are a slightly different person. Your thoughts sharpened, your emotions calibrated, your memories replayed and remade. So when you lie down tonight, remember, you are not resting, you are rebuilding. The replay experiments. How do we know that the sleeping brain learns? Not from dreams, but from rats. Yes, tiny, whiskered scientists of the night. Their discoveries reshaped how we understand memory, teaching us that sleep is not silence, but rehearsal. In the early 1990s, researchers at MIT built a small maze, a simple track with turns and rewards at the end. They wired up rats with electrodes that recorded electrical activity from their hippocampus, the brain's center for navigation and memory. Each time a rat scurried through the maze, specific neurons, called place cells, fired in sequence, each representing a location on the path. It was like a melody of motion. Neuron A for the start, neuron B for the corner, neuron C for the goal. That sequence became the rat's song of the maze. But then something astonishing happened. When the rats fell asleep, the same neurons fired again, in the exact same order. The brain was replaying the experience, faster, quieter, but unmistakable. It was as if the rat was dreaming the maze, reliving it to remember. This was the birth of the replay hypothesis, the idea that sleep is when memory consolidates through reenactment of waking experience. Later experiments confirmed this across species. Birds rehearsed songs in their sleep. Humans consolidated motor skills, language, and emotional memories overnight. Electroencephalogram (EEG) readings showed patterns during slow-wave sleep that mirrored learning activity from the day. Functional MRI scans of humans revealed similar reactivation in the hippocampus and visual cortex during deep rest, as though your brain were watching its own highlight reel. This isn't metaphor, it's neurophysiology. Every remembered route, every learned motion, every piece of yesterday's chaos gets replayed, refined, and filed. The hippocampus acts as the temporary storage drive, fast, flexible, but limited. The cortex is the long-term archive, slow but vast. Replay is the transfer process. It's the save as function of the mind. The brain doesn't replay with images. It uses spike trains, rapid bursts of electrical signals. During sharp wave ripples, the hippocampus fires sequences of spikes lasting less than a second, each one encoding a moment in space or time. At the same moment, the neocortex listens, responding with rhythmic sleep spindles, synchronizing both regions. It's a conversation in code, short, rhythmic, efficient. If you could hear it, it would sound like static, but hidden inside is the echo of experience. Some scientists compare it to compression algorithms, the brain reducing vast experience into essential bits of information. Not everything is saved. Only what's tagged as meaningful makes it through the night. Emotion plays the bouncer at the club of memory. Events charged with feeling, joy, fear, excitement, are more likely to replay. That's why emotionally heavy dreams often follow stressful days. The amygdala, the brain's emotion hub, works closely with the hippocampus during sleep. It adds intensity, prioritizing survival and relevance. This mechanism ensures that you remember what matters, not what's trivial. But it can also trap trauma, embedding it too deeply. In PTSD, for instance, the replay loop never fully stops. The dream becomes a replay gone rogue. Humans replay too, though our mazes are mental, not physical. During sleep, your brain reactivates daytime learning. The piano keys you practiced, the math problem you struggled with, the conversation that lingered in your mind. Neurons that worked together during the day find each other again at night. Sleep fuses the fragments, the what, the where, the when, into coherent memory. When you wake up and suddenly understand something that confused you the night before, that's replay. That's the night shift of cognition. Dreams aren't just random stories, they are simulations stitched from replay data. The hippocampus sends fragments of experience to the cortex, which fills in the blanks with imagination. That's why dreams often feel vaguely familiar but disjointed. They're reconstructions from your own archives. In REM, these replays become emotionally rich. In NREM, they're analytical and dry. Together, they integrate what you've learned into both logic and feeling. Your mind doesn't dream instead of remembering. It dreams to remember. Recent experiments with human EEG and machine learning allow scientists to decode dream content. By analyzing brain activity during sleep, researchers can predict whether a person is dreaming of faces, objects, or places. It's still crude, but it proves one thing. Dreams and memory are inseparable. Even more fascinating, when subjects are woken up mid-dream and asked to describe what they saw, the same brain regions that process visual and spatial memory light up again. The dream is the replay, just rendered in narrative form. Every night, you perform an invisible experiment. You relive your life in fragments, sorting, testing, replaying, until chaos becomes coherence. Your dreams are not escape, they're revision. And when you wake, the draft has changed. Human dreams as integration. When rats replay mazes and birds rehearse songs, we watch biology in its simplest form, pattern repetition. But in humans, the story deepens. We don't just replay our experiences, we reinterpret them. Dreams are the stage on which memory, emotion, and imagination meet and merge. A theater where yesterday becomes tomorrow. Every day, we collect fragments, faces, words, sensations, decisions. They swirl inside the hippocampus, temporary, chaotic, raw. Then night falls and the orchestra begins tuning. RM sorts the fragments, classifying and tagging them. REM takes over and blends them into something new, coherent, emotional, meaningful. This process is called memory integration, the stitching together of experiences into a stable understanding of the world. Without it, we would wake each day as strangers to ourselves, a mind full of unlinked impressions, a diary without context. During deep sleep, as replay sequences run, they don't occur in isolation. Different brain regions, sensory, emotional, linguistic, begin to synchronize. A sound from your day, a face from a memory, a feeling from childhood, they fire together, forming bridges. This cross-linking is what gives memories meaning. You're not just remembering what happened, you're connecting it to everything else you know. That's why you might dream of an old classroom while thinking of a modern challenge, or see a long-lost friend when processing new grief. The dream isn't random. It's an algorithm for association. Human dreams are steeped in emotion. The amygdala, the brain's emotional sentinel, becomes hyperactive during REM, while rational regions, like the prefrontal cortex, rest. This imbalance lets emotion reshape memory. Pain softens, joy deepens, fear transforms into metaphor. It's psychological alchemy, the brain regulating mood by reinterpreting life's raw material. In that sense, dreams heal. They help us feel safer, less fractured, more complete. After a painful day, your dream might weave the memory into a strange story where the pain is disguised, diluted, or resolved. You wake lighter because the narrative has changed. Dreams also maintain autobiographical continuity, the story of you. Throughout life, your sense of identity depends on a coherent narrative. Dreams quietly update it. They replay fragments from the day, but reinsert them into your existing story, filling gaps, correcting inconsistencies, blending new experience with old memory. That's why even surreal dreams feel familiar. They're built from your personal language of symbols. The dream ego, the you inside the dream, is not fantasy. It's the ongoing rehearsal of self. Without dreams, the sense of who you are would begin to erode, like a manuscript left unwritten. When people practice a skill before sleep, playing piano, studying words, or visualizing movement, their performance improves the next day. Brain scans show that related areas reactivate during sleep. It's not mere repetition, it's integration. The brain doesn't just replay a scale or a phrase, it folds the learning into context, tempo, rhythm, feeling, error correction. By morning, the act becomes smoother, more intuitive, as if the mind rehearsed in secret. Dreams are the workshop where information becomes intuition. Integration doesn't only stabilize memory, it creates. REM sleep is a hotbed of creative synthesis. Ideas that seem unrelated in waking life can merge fluidly in dreams. That's why artists, inventors, and scientists so often credit dreams for breakthroughs, from Mendeleev's periodic table to Paul McCartney's Yesterday. Dreaming allows the brain to explore without consequence, to blend logic and emotion, knowledge and imagination into something entirely new. It is evolution's sandbox for creativity. In human sleep, the boundary between science and philosophy blurs. Dreams reconcile opposites, logic and intuition, chaos and order, past and future. They allow us to test scenarios, rehearse emotions, restructure memories, and renew the fabric of consciousness. Each night, we dissolve, and each morning, we reassemble, a little wiser, a little more whole. The dream is not escape, it is synthesis. When you dream, your brain is writing poetry in biology. Each neuron, a word, each memory, a verse. The story it tells is not about what was, but about who you are becoming. Dreams weave fragments into identity, emotion into understanding, memory into meaning. They are the bridge between yesterday and tomorrow, the silent architect of consciousness. Practice without effort. You close your eyes. The lights fade. The world slips away. And yet, somewhere deep within, you are still training. Your hands no longer move. Your eyes no longer track the notes. But your neurons continue their silent repetitions. The melody is replayed, refined, perfected. Welcome to the workshop of the sleeping brain, where effort is replaced by rhythm, and learning continues in whispers. We often think of sleep as rest, a pause between one day and the next. But for the brain, sleep is continuation. In the quiet hours, your mind becomes a rehearsal hall. Every pattern you practiced, every movement, every phrase, every calculation you struggled with is called back for revision. The difference? You're no longer consciously steering. During wakefulness, learning is clumsy, filled with trial and error. During sleep, learning becomes elegant, automatic, and optimized. This is the paradox of effortlessness. The less you try, the more your brain learns. Researchers at Harvard and Stanford conducted experiments with piano learners. Two groups practiced a melody. One stayed awake afterward, the other went to sleep. When tested the next morning, the sleepers outperformed the awake. Not slightly, dramatically. Neural imaging showed increased synchronization between the motor cortex, basal ganglia, and cerebellum, regions responsible for coordination and timing. Their brains had kept rehearsing the motion patterns through neural replay during slow-wave sleep. The notes, tempo, and even micro-errors had been recalibrated, like an orchestra tightening its rhythm overnight. This phenomenon extends beyond music. Athletes, surgeons, and typists all experience the same invisible training. It's called offline consolidation, the process where the brain strengthens learned motor sequences without active practice. The muscle memory people speak of isn't stored in muscles at all. It's stored in the neural circuits that control precision and timing. During sleep, these circuits replay activity patterns at accelerated speeds, sometimes 20 times faster than real life. Your brain compresses the experience, extracting efficiency from repetition. It's as if each night you perform 1,000 invisible rehearsals in the time it takes to dream once. Have you ever struggled with a problem, given up, gone to sleep, and woken up with the answer? That's the same mechanism at work, just in the realm of abstract thought. When conscious effort halts, the subconscious continues. Neural replay doesn't only handle movement, it refines patterns of logic, strategy, language, and emotion. The prefrontal cortex, quieted by sleep, no longer demands linear reasoning. This allows the default mode network, the system active during daydreaming and imagination, to take control. Connections that were too faint to notice while awake become visible in dreams. New associations form. Old ones strengthen. The mind practices thinking itself. If you could peek inside your brain during the night, you'd see cycles of slow-wave NREM followed by REM bursts. Each phase refines a different kind of learning. NREM, procedural, factual, structural, the grammar of skill. REM, creative, emotional, adaptive, the poetry of mastery. Together they create the full lesson. In one, your neurons carve paths of precision. In the other, they add flexibility. Without both, learning collapses into fragments. That's why cramming before an exam rarely works. The brain hasn't had time to translate repetition into knowledge. Real understanding happens between study sessions, not during them. History quietly hints at this truth. Elias Howe dreamt of a needle-piercing cloth from below and awoke with the design for the sewing machine. Otto Louis dreamt of an experiment and discovered the first neurotransmitter. Paul McCartney dreamt of a melody and wrote Yesterday Before Breakfast. These weren't miracles. They were integrations, the product of sleeping practice, where ideas refine themselves in silence. Creativity is not chaos. It's structured rehearsal under the veil of rest. Imagine your waking mind as a sculptor chiseling roughly at marble. You strike, adjust, measure, sweat. Then you sleep, and the unseen apprentice returns at night, smoothing, refining, perfecting the details. When you wake, your hands remember what they never did, and your ideas have evolved in your absence. That's what dreams do. They finish the sculpture. Modern neuroscience shows that effort activates stress circuits, cortisol, norepinephrine, which, in high doses, disrupt memory formation. Sleep, by contrast, lowers these levels, creating the ideal environment for learning. So the most productive part of your day may not be the hours of study, but the quiet moments of surrender. To sleep is not to quit. It's to trust your brain to continue the work. Every night your mind enters a gym of silence. You run marathons of memory. You lift weights of thought. You rehearse, repair, and refine. Without will, without awareness. In that darkness, learning becomes effortless. Growth becomes natural. And the brain, that patient teacher, whispers again. Emotion and memory. Sleep is not just for remembering facts. It's for feeling them correctly. The brain doesn't archive memories cold and sterile. It wraps them in emotion, warmth, fear, tenderness, regret, because emotion decides what we keep and what we let fade into oblivion. Every experience we have during the day comes with an emotional signature, a pulse from the amygdala, the almond-shaped guardian of our feelings. When night arrives, that guardian does not rest. It returns to its memories, replaying them like a critic rewatching scenes of a film, judging which ones deserve to stay. But something magical happens during sleep. While the amygdala remains active, its sharp edges are softened by the prefrontal cortex, which now engages less like a commander and more like a quiet editor. The result? Emotional intensity is preserved, but its sting is dulled. A heartbreak becomes a lesson. A fear becomes resilience. A joy becomes nostalgia. That's the brain's emotional alchemy, turning the chaos of life into something we can live with. The emotional transformation happens mainly during REM sleep. In REM, the amygdala and hippocampus are highly active, while the noradrenaline system, the one that fuels alertness and stress, shuts down. This is crucial. It means we can revisit emotional memories in a chemically safe environment. We can feel without panic, remember without breaking. It's like therapy within the skull. That's why after a good night's sleep, a problem feels smaller, a loss less raw, a fear more distant. Sleep doesn't erase emotion. It reframes it. It gives it meaning. Neuroscientist Matthew Walker calls this process overnight therapy. In his studies, participants shown disturbing images reacted strongly at first, but after a night of sleep, their emotional reactivity dropped by up to 60%. The REM phase had decoupled emotion from memory. The facts remained. The feeling had changed. That's why nightmares, paradoxically, are part of healing. They let the brain replay trauma in a weakened emotional environment, testing it again and again until the intensity subsides. When that process fails, the emotion stays raw, a hallmark of PTSD. It's not that trauma is remembered too much, it's remembered without the healing filter of sleep. Emotions and cognition are not opposites, they're partners. During the day, the prefrontal cortex guides decision-making. At night, the amygdala speaks louder, reminding the cortex what truly matters. This duet, alternating control, is what makes learning human. You don't remember everything you read. You remember what moved you. Emotion decides value. Sleep decides structure. That's why stories, songs, and meaningful experiences stick more firmly than rote data. During REM, this prioritization is reinforced. The cortex reorganizes itself around emotionally relevant memories. It's how we build wisdom, not just knowledge. Dreams replay emotional themes in creative, often surreal ways. You might dream of falling, a metaphor for loss of control. You might dream of flight, a rehearsal of freedom. The brain uses symbols to simulate emotional resolution. By re-experiencing fear, shame, love, or joy in symbolic form, you practice coping. This is evolution's most intimate therapy session, millions of years refined, conducted nightly in total silence. At the molecular level, emotion and memory intertwine through neurochemistry. Serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine rise and fall in rhythmic balance, sculpting emotional tone. Serotonin stabilizes mood, the gentle brush that calms storms. Dopamine rewards associative leaps, turning new insights into pleasure. Acetylcholine sharpens focus, reinforcing emotionally significant details. Together, they act as conductors of the emotional symphony of sleep. When that harmony breaks, as in depression, insomnia, or chronic stress, memory becomes distorted, and emotion, untamed, overwhelms thought. Sleep is not luxury, it's calibration. When sleep is cut short, the amygdala becomes hyperactive. The brain overreacts to minor stress, like an untrained instrument playing too loudly. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which normally restrains emotional outbursts, goes offline. That's why exhaustion makes us irritable, anxious, impulsive. We lose the filter that turns emotion into meaning. A world without sleep would be a world of unrefined feelings, a raw, unedited scream. Every night, sleep rescues us from emotional overload. It lets the storm settle and the ripples of the day fade into calm. Dreams, then, are not escapes. They are emotional negotiations, compromises between what we felt and what we can endure. By morning, we don't forget our pain. We understand it differently. The mind that sleeps is the heart that heals. In the theater of dreams, emotion is not a distraction from reason. It is the raw material from which reason grows. To feel deeply is to be human. To sleep is to remember wisely. And in that nightly balance between heart and cortex, the mind becomes whole again. Dreams as creativity. Somewhere between reason and madness, in that fragile twilight where thought loses its shape, the brain begins to invent. It no longer repeats the past. It remixes it. It weaves unrelated fragments, a sound, a color, a word, into new patterns of meaning. That is the art of dreaming. That is the root of creativity. In wakefulness, the mind obeys rules. Logic governs, structure constrains, and reality keeps imagination in its cage. But during REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex, the inner critic, goes silent. The boundaries of logic melt. Ideas flow freely across forbidden bridges. The brain begins improvising. It samples from memory, loops sensations, splices emotions. A scientist becomes a bird. A memory becomes a melody. An impossible world feels perfectly natural. This is neural jazz, the improvisation of thought without inhibition. Neuroscientific imaging reveals that during dreaming, the associative cortex, regions linking unrelated ideas, lights up intensely. Meanwhile, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the seat of logical control, dims to silence. It's as if the conductor leaves the stage and the orchestra begins to play by instinct. The result? Novel combinations of familiar elements, a poet's metaphor, a mathematician's intuition, an artist's new palette. Dreaming brainwaves resemble those of creativity while awake, chaotic yet patterned, random yet rhythmically self-organized. In this chaos, connections form that waking reason would have censored. History whispers its evidence. Mendeleev saw the periodic table in a dream, the elements arranging themselves in elegant order. Kekulé dreamt of a serpent biting its tail and awoke with the structure of benzene. Mary Shelley dreamt of a lifeless body awakening, and Frankenstein was born. Elias Howe dreamt of spears piercing cloth and invented the sewing machine's needle. These were not accidents. They were integrations, the sleeping brain solving problems too complex for the waking one. Dreams are the mind's sandbox for experimentation. Free of consequence, it tests possibilities, breaks patterns, and refines its designs until they sing. Creativity is not mystical. It's molecular. During REM sleep, dopamine surges in the mesolimbic pathway, the same circuit that fuels curiosity and reward. This chemical cocktail makes associative leaps feel pleasurable. In dreams, the brain is rewarded not for accuracy, but for novelty. That's why dream logic feels right even when absurd. The brain celebrates invention over consistency. When you wake, the dopamine residue remains, nudging you to explore that strange thought that made perfect sense an hour ago. And sometimes, that nonsense becomes genius. Dreams often feel like riddles. Why a locked door? Why a faceless voice? Why the same street, but underwater this time? Symbols are not decorations. They are compressed metaphors, dense packets of emotion and memory. Each dream symbol is a fusion point, a meeting between logic and emotion, past and present, fear and desire. That's why art and dreams speak the same language. They both translate the ineffable. In this way, creativity is not creation from nothing. It's recombination, a dance between chaos and structure, fueled by sleep. The morning after a creative dream feels like waking from another life. You may not remember the story, but you carry its residue, a feeling, a rhythm, an image that won't leave. This is how the subconscious hands ideas to consciousness, a handoff between worlds. Artists, scientists, and inventors who respect that threshold often keep a dream notebook. They know the first seconds after waking are sacred, a window when imagination still speaks before reason interrupts. If captured, that fleeting whisper can become a masterpiece. From a biological perspective, dreams let the brain simulate reality safely. They run what-if scenarios, emotional rehearsals, creative prototypes, hypothetical futures. This process is adaptive. It prepares the organism for complexity and uncertainty. Dreams are not chaos. They are low-risk experiments in meaning-making. They allow the brain to fail without consequence, which is the very definition of creativity. What if creativity is not something humans do, but something consciousness is? In dreaming, we witness the mind creating worlds without instruction, without reward, without audience. It invents for the sheer pleasure of invention. Maybe that's why humans tell stories, paint, build, compose, to reenact what the dreaming mind already knows, that to create is to exist. Dreams are the origin of art, and art is the echo of dreams. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you are both observer and creator. Your neurons hum softly, building cathedrals of meaning out of sparks of chaos. Every night, the mind rehearses the act of creation, the same act that defines our species. You sleep, but imagination stays awake. You rest, but the dream continues its work. And when you wake, you carry fragments of that infinite workshop, a rhythm, a vision, a whisper, from which new worlds are born. The healing function of dreams. You close your eyes not only to rest, but to recover from noise, from emotion, from yourself. In the theater of dreams, your mind becomes both doctor and patient. It diagnoses the wounds of the day and begins to heal them, quietly, invisibly, in the rhythm of REM and the stillness of night. When we fall asleep, consciousness dissolves, but the emotional brain keeps working. It's as if the day's experiences are placed on an invisible table, memories, arguments, fears, unfinished sentences, and the brain begins to sort them. It doesn't erase pain. It processes it, piece by piece. The amygdala replays emotional events, while the hippocampus repositions them in context. Together, they perform a kind of narrative editing, turning chaos into coherence. In this way, sleep is not escape, it's repair. Modern neuroscience confirms this hidden therapy. During REM sleep, levels of the stress chemical norepinephrine drop to nearly zero. It's the only time in your entire day when that happens. That chemical silence creates a perfect environment for emotional recovery. The amygdala can revisit painful memories without triggering panic. It can re-experience them safely in simulation, while the prefrontal cortex reinterprets their meaning. This is why, after a night's sleep, emotions often feel less sharp, and trauma begins to fade from raw pain into narrative memory. Dreaming is your brain's way of saying, "You survived, let's make sense of it." Consider how often dreams replay conflicts, a conversation that went wrong, a confrontation that never happened, a loved one who disappeared. These are not accidents. They're mental rehearsals for closure. Dreams allow emotional rehearsal without physical consequence. When you argue in a dream, forgive, or cry, those actions are simulated, but their effects on the nervous system are real. The autonomic nervous system reacts, but within limits. The heartbeat rises, then falls, stress peaks, then dissipates. It's as if the mind is teaching the body how to feel safely again. This is the quiet brilliance of evolution, a built-in mechanism for trauma integration, disguised as imagination. When this process is interrupted by insomnia, depression, or medication that suppresses REM, emotional healing stalls. PTSD patients, for example, often experience fragmented REM cycles. Their nightmares are repetitive, raw, unprocessed. The emotional circuits replay the trauma but fail to complete the recontextualization. The result is hyperreactivity. The brain remains stuck in alarm mode. Restoring healthy REM sleep can restart that emotional repair loop. It's not merely rest, it's medicine. Dreams reflect what the waking mind hides. You may appear calm by day, but your dreams reveal the undercurrents: stress, longing, guilt, hope. In this way, dreams act like a psychological mirror, showing you not what you think, but what you feel. This is why ancient cultures saw dreams as messages, not from gods, but from the depths of the self. The mind heals by acknowledging truth, and dreams whisper that truth in symbols your waking logic cannot censor. Sleep's restorative effect is not just mental, it's biochemical. During deep and REM sleep, the brain flushes out toxins via the glymphatic system, a cleaning network that clears away metabolic waste like beta amyloid, which accumulates during wakefulness. Meanwhile, growth factors such as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, increase, encouraging neural repair and new synapses. At the same time, cortisol, the stress hormone, drops to baseline. Inflammation decreases. The body, like the mind, finds balance again. In the chaos of life, sleep offers the last sacred place where nothing is demanded of you. No decisions, no noise, no performance, just being. That's why sleep deprivation feels not only exhausting, but existentially painful. Without dreams, we lose not only rest, we lose the space where we are allowed to be unfinished. Across cultures and centuries, dreams have been seen as healing journeys, from the temples of Asclepius in Greece to shamanic dream rituals in Siberia and the Amazon. They all understood the same truth that neuroscience now rediscovers. Healing begins when you stop running from yourself. Dreams let you face yourself, but softly, without judgment. In the language of metaphor, not confrontation. You don't fight your fears there. You translate them into stories, and stories are how the mind heals. Sleep is the mind's hospital, but one without walls or doctors. Every night, you enter, not as a patient, but as your own healer. Your mind stitches emotional wounds with the thread of imagination. Your memories, once jagged, are filed smooth, and your sense of self, fractured by the noise of the day, is made whole again. To dream is to remember. To sleep is to recover. And in the silence of the night, the mind forgives itself and begins again. The balance. between forgetting and remembering. Every night, the brain plays a delicate game, a balancing act between keeping and letting go, between holding on to what defines us and releasing what would otherwise crush us. It's a paradox. To remember clearly, the brain must forget selectively. And in the dark theater of dreams, that balance is rehearsed again and again. We think of memory as treasure, something to guard, collect, and preserve. But memory is heavy. Too much of it can paralyze. If every sound, every word, every face you saw stayed perfectly vivid, you wouldn't be wise, you'd be overwhelmed. People with hyperthymesia, a rare condition of near-perfect recall, describe it not as a gift, but as a burden. They cannot escape their past. Every day feels like living all days at once. The brain, in its wisdom, prevents this. It forgets. Deliberately, mercifully. Sleep is where that mercy unfolds. At night, the brain becomes a gardener. Throughout the day, synapses, the tiny bridges between neurons, grow wildly as new experiences sprout. Each conversation, each sight, each thought adds a new branch to the dense forest of connections. But the forest cannot grow infinitely. It must be tended. During slow-wave sleep, the gardener moves silently through the mind, trimming weak connections, leaving only the strongest and most meaningful. This process, synaptic pruning, is nature's way of saying, keep what matters, let go of the rest. In experiments with mice, researchers watched neurons literally shrink during sleep, reducing their synaptic weight by up to 20%. It's like defragmenting a hard drive, clearing space for new data, preventing overload. When we wake, our brain is lighter, faster, ready for the next day's input. It sounds contradictory, but forgetting is essential to learning. By removing irrelevant connections, the brain sharpens the pathways that remain. It's like sculpting marble. Knowledge emerges not from adding, but from carving away. Imagine trying to play the piano while remembering every mistake you ever made, every wrong note, every hesitation. Sleep erases the noise, leaving only the harmony. This is how practice becomes skill and repetition becomes mastery. The cerebellum, hippocampus, and neocortex all take part in this nocturnal editing, a dialogue between short-term and long-term memory, deciding what deserves permanence. Forgetting isn't passive decay, it's active biology. Certain AMPA receptors, molecular gates on neurons, are selectively removed during sleep, weakening unused synapses. Meanwhile, the ARC protein triggers local dismantling of redundant connections. These molecular edits are guided by patterns of neural reactivation, the same replay we saw earlier, but now with judgment. Was this important? Will it be needed again? The brain votes. Some memories are promoted to long-term storage. Others quietly fade. It's democracy at the cellular level. Not all forgetting is intellectual. Some is emotional, the kind that keeps us sane. The emotional brain, the amygdala, again, also prunes. It reduces the charge of painful memories, muting their emotional volume until they no longer dominate. This doesn't mean erasure. The memory remains, but the sting softens. That's why time and sleep heal. Both are forms of forgetting. Without forgetting, the mind becomes crowded. Sleep deprivation, chronic stress, and certain neurological disorders disrupt this nightly reset. The result is cognitive clutter, racing thoughts, anxiety, difficulty focusing. It's not that the brain forgets too much, it forgets too little. Depression, too, has been linked to impaired synaptic pruning. Old emotional circuits keep firing, replaying sadness, that should have faded. In a sense, depression is the failure to forget pain. Memory without forgetting is chaos. Forgetting without memory is emptiness. Between the two lies intelligence, the ability to know what matters and to let go of what doesn't. The brain doesn't aim for perfect recall. It aims for meaningful recall. That's why memory is shaped by stories, not data, by emotion, not repetition. Each night, sleep rebalances this scale, keeping you human, not machine. Dreams are not just rehearsals for memory. They are ceremonies of letting go. Every forgotten name, every fading image is a gift, a space for new experiences to grow. The act of forgetting is not loss. It is renewal. The mind prunes so it may bloom again. And each morning, you awaken lighter, carrying not everything, but enough. The rebirth each morning. Each night, consciousness dissolves into darkness, and each morning it returns, reshaped. It is a quiet resurrection, a daily act of reassembly. You close your eyes as one version of yourself, and awaken as another, similar but never identical. Sleep is not an interruption of life. It is the hidden half of becoming. When we drift into sleep, the structures that maintain the sense of I, the default mode network, the internal narrator, fade into silence. The boundaries of identity blur. Time loses its sequence. Thoughts become landscapes. In dreams, you might be both observer and participant, child and elder, pursuer and pursued. The self fractures, but not in destruction, in exploration. This temporary dissolution is essential. It allows the mind to reorganize itself without the constant interference of ego. Just as the body regenerates cells, the psyche regenerates perspective. In the deep stages of sleep, the brain performs its nightly maintenance. The glymphatic system washes the cortex, flushing out metabolic waste, the physical residue of thought. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex resets its sensitivity, lowering emotional overreaction, restoring balance. It's not just rest, it's recalibration. Each night, the machinery of attention, memory, and emotion is taken apart and rebuilt. And when the morning comes, you awaken not only rested, but revised. After dreaming, the fragments of memory, emotion, and imagination begin to coalesce again. That first minute of wakefulness, the blur between dream and daylight, is when integration happens. The brain reassembles its networks and the self returns like a mosaic, newly arranged, subtly altered. This is why sometimes you wake up with sudden clarity, a problem solved, a feeling understood, a peace restored. The dream has done its work. Psychologists have long observed that mood and perspective shift after sleep. You can go to bed in despair and wake with calm detachment. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The night dissolved emotional weight, trimmed cognitive noise, and restored the hierarchy of importance. Sleep is nature's quiet editor. It removes distortion, leaving meaning. That's why phrases like "sleep on it" exist in every language. It's not superstition, it's biology. In ancient myth, night and morning were metaphors for death and rebirth. The Egyptian sun god Ra was said to die each evening and rise renewed at dawn. In Hindu tradition, Brahma awakens the universe anew each day. Even modern science echoes this metaphor. Neurons themselves die and are reborn, their synapses rewired, their patterns refreshed. The rhythm of waking and sleeping is the oldest story of the cosmos, destruction and renewal. entropy and order, chaos and meaning. Each sunrise, your brain performs that cosmic act on a smaller stage. That instant between dream and wake, the few seconds before identity clicks back in, is sacred. The dreamer still lingers there, half in the subconscious ocean, half on the shore of reason. Poets, mystics, and scientists have all described that liminal space as a wellspring of insight. It's when the dream's logic and waking clarity briefly overlap, when imagination and reason shake hands. To linger there, even for a breath, is to witness the rebirth of the mind. Therapists often note that a single night's sleep can change the entire emotional context of a trauma. Why? Because sleep re-anchors the self. It separates past from present. It resets the story. Dreams act as gentle mediators between chaos and continuity. When you awaken, you remember not everything, but enough to rebuild the thread of identity. You are, in a very literal sense, the sum of what your brain decided to keep while you slept. The act of waking is the act of creation. The mind reconstructs reality from memory and prediction. The world you open your eyes to is not the same as the one you closed them to. It's re-simulated anew. Consciousness does not simply resume, it reboots. Every sight, sound, and thought is the first of its kind again. This is why mornings often carry a strange beauty, a sense that something is possible again. That's not poetry, that's neurochemistry. Freshly balanced dopamine and serotonin paint the world with optimism. You are literally chemically reborn. What is identity if it can dissolve nightly and return with new understanding? Perhaps the self is not a fixed structure, but a rhythm, a pattern, sustained by continuity of change. We die in fragments each night and reassemble from memory and hope. Dreaming ensures that rebirth never stops. It is the mind's assurance that there will always be another version of you, one slightly wiser, lighter, more open to wonder. Each morning is not repetition. It is creation. Your brain, having wandered through the infinite, returns to build again the temple of the self. And as sunlight touches your eyes, you remember who you are, but also who you are becoming. Sleep is not the opposite of life. It is its renewal. You fall into dreams to learn how to awaken again, not as you were, but as you are meant to be. The endless workshop. At night, the city sleeps. But the mind does not. Behind closed eyes, billions of silent artisans begin their shift. Synapses hum like factory lines, assembling, welding, polishing. Ideas are melted, poured into new molds. Memories are tested for strength. Weak ones break and fade into dust. The strong remain, sharpened by rehearsal. Your brain, that vast labyrinth of sparks, is never truly still. It is a workshop that runs 24 hours a day, where the craftsman and the material are one and the same. Every second, your neurons whisper. Even when you're dreaming of nothing, they're communicating, synchronizing, keeping their timing tight, like musicians rehearsing in the dark. In slow-wave sleep, they pulse in perfect unison, a deep, rolling rhythm that sweeps across the cortex. This rhythm is not random. It's the pulse of reconstruction. During these waves, memories from the hippocampus, short-term, fragile, electric, are transferred to the cortex, where they crystallize into long-term knowledge. The hippocampus writes the day's story, and the cortex archives it. It's a quiet collaboration between history and meaning. In this way, each night becomes a shift of librarians, moving thoughts from the shelves of today into the archives of forever. If you could listen to your brain at night, you would not hear silence. You'd hear the rhythm of repair, clicks, sparks, tiny bursts of current. Neuroscientists call them sleep spindles, brief explosions of oscillation that light up the thalamus and cortex. They last only a second, but they are the heartbeat of learning. Each spindle strengthens connections between related ideas, binding them into coherent memory networks. You might dream of walking through a city, but beneath that dream, your motor cortex is rehearsing movements, your visual cortex replaying scenes, your prefrontal cortex organizing context and consequence. The dream is metaphor. The work beneath it is structure. Even in dreams, the brain refuses idleness. In REM sleep, its energy use rivals that of waking life. It consumes as much oxygen, fires as many synapses, burns as much glucose, but all toward inward construction. Here the mind becomes a composer, weaving associations between distant memories. The absurd logic of dreams, doors that lead to oceans, voices that belong to strangers, is not chaos, it's creativity. The brain is testing connections that waking reason would never dare. It is not sleeping, it is inventing. Emotions, too, are refined in this workshop. The amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and anterior cingulate engage in a nocturnal negotiation. Anger softens, fear loses its edge, joy finds new meaning. Like molten metal being cooled and hammered, raw emotion is shaped into understanding. That's why we often wake with a calmer heart. The brain has worked through the storm, not by ignoring it, but by transforming it. If the brain never slept, its architecture would collapse under its own weight. Learning would become noise, emotion, instability. But by alternating between wake and sleep, it achieves rhythm. Wakefulness builds complexity. Sleep restores clarity. It's a cycle of entropy and order, decay and repair, forgetting and creation. Each night, the mind dismantles itself so it can rebuild stronger. It's not rest, it's reinvention. Imagine standing outside a great cathedral at night. Inside, unseen workers polish glass, mend arches, tune the great organ for the next day's mass. That's your brain. A cathedral under endless renovation. Dreams are its scaffolding. Sleep is its silent concert. And when morning comes, the doors open, and you walk in, unaware that the building has changed in 1,000 subtle ways. You remember better, feel lighter, think clearer. The mind has worked through the night to make sure you can live another day as yourself. The workshop never closes. It only shifts roles, from the daylight labor of perception to the midnight craft of reflection. You may think you rest, but your neurons are sculpting meaning, assembling the machinery of tomorrow's thoughts. The dreams you forget were not wasted. They were blueprints. Each morning, the mind hands you its finished product, a slightly wiser version of you. Hook forward, from memory to imagination. When the night's work is done, the mind does not rest on what it has learned. It begins to play. From the repaired scaffolds of memory, new bridges begin to grow. The mind, having restored its archive, now dares to imagine what could be. This is where memory ends and imagination begins, and where the next great mystery of the brain awaits. Memory is not a library, it is clay. Every time we recall something, we reshape it, slightly, unknowingly. In that reshaping, imagination finds its opening. When the hippocampus replays a pattern and the prefrontal cortex begins to connect it with others, something unexpected happens. Association, analogy, invention. That's how a remembered melody becomes a new composition. How a conversation turns into an idea for a story. How yesterday's lesson germinates into tomorrow's discovery. Imagination is not born from emptiness. It is memory rearranged by freedom. Even before dawn, the mind begins to test the new wiring it built overnight. Somewhere in the default mode network, a quiet dialogue starts between what is known and what is possible. Neuroscientists have observed that the same brain regions active during creative thought are also alive during REM sleep. Dreams, in this sense, are not escape, they are rehearsal. They are imagination in its raw, untamed state, where logic bows to possibility. In the morning, that chaos condenses into insight. The workshop becomes a studio. The mind moves from repairing memories to painting with them. All creation, whether in art or science, depends on this transition, from fixed memory to fluid recombination. When you awaken with a new solution, a new vision, it's not because your brain invented from nothing. It rearranged the old in a new geometry. Dreams are the sketches. Wakefulness is the sculpture, and every imaginative act is a quiet continuation of sleep's work. There's a neural bridge, too, between the hippocampus, keeper of experience, and the prefrontal cortex, architect of prediction. In this communication lies the seed of imagination. The hippocampus whispers, "This is what has been." The cortex replies, "And this is what could be." That dialogue is the birth of creativity, the mind's way of running simulations before taking action in the real world. It's the foundation of art, empathy, and foresight. And it begins, always, with memory. Every dream is a prototype, a story the brain tells to test the rules of reality. What if I could fly? What if the past were different? What if danger returned and I survived this time? The dream tries, fails, rewrites. The imagination learns. By the time we wake, our neural networks are richer, our mental flexibility greater. The sleeping mind doesn't only remember life, it designs it. If memory is the preservation of experience and sleep is the refinement of meaning, then imagination is their union, the mind reaching beyond what it knows. The next chapter of this story belongs to those invisible networks that bind memories into perception, patterns into understanding, and sparks into the stories of self. How do billions of neurons, each whispering through synapses, create the world we see, feel, and believe in? How does imagination emerge from electric silence? That is the bridge we now cross, from the plasticity of dreams to the architecture of thought. You have learned how the mind reshapes itself each night, how sleep sculpts, prunes, and polishes memory. But the story doesn't end with remembering. It continues with creation. In the next chapter, we'll follow the sparks of those renewed connections as they form the networks of imagination, the patterns of perception, and the living canvas of consciousness itself. The night has built the tools. Now, the mind begins to use them.